A brave fight for freedom. Trump and Zelensky discuss war, NATO, and the road ahead. He's a brave man, putting up one hell of a fight. With this striking remark, former U.S. President Donald Trump began his meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. The sentence immediately captured the spirit of the conversation. Recognition of Ukraine's resilience and respect for its leader, who has become a symbol of defiance against Russia's invasion. Why this meeting mattered. Although one of many diplomatic encounters on the day's agenda, both leaders treated this discussion as a priority. Zelensky opened with gratitude, not only for American military and political backing, but also for humanitarian efforts, including joint initiatives by the First Ladies of Ukraine and the U.S. on protecting children affected by the war. The conversation soon turned to the battlefield. Zelensky reported that Ukrainian forces had pushed forward 360 kilometers in a month, taking back territory and capturing thousands of Russian soldiers. He credited these gains to the determination of Ukrainian troops and the crucial assistance of Western partners, especially NATO allies and U.S. military supplies. Main topics on the table: military progress. Territorial gains have boosted morale, but Kyiv insists more weapons are needed to keep momentum. Prisoner exchanges. With thousands of captured Russians, Ukraine hopes for deals to bring its own soldiers home. Economic pressure. Both leaders pointed to Russia's weakening economy, stressing that sanctions must continue. Energy independence. Zelensky urged Europe to cut ties with Russian oil and gas. Slovakia appears ready to shift, but Hungary's resistance remains a major obstacle. Points of agreement and tension. When asked if NATO should shoot down Russian aircraft violating Allied airspace, Zelensky's response was unequivocal. Yes, I do. Trump, however, was more cautious. On long-term security guarantees for Ukraine, he called the discussion too early, preferring to leave options open. He also suggested personal diplomacy with Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, hinting he might persuade him to abandon Russian energy. How far things have come. For Trump, the most dramatic change since his last meeting with Zelensky was Russia's economic collapse. A war many believed would last 3 or 4 days has become a grinding struggle. Ukraine, against all odds, continues to resist. You've got to hand it to the Ukrainian soldiers, Trump admitted, reflecting widespread surprise at Kyiv's endurance. The larger picture. The meeting highlighted both achievements and uncertainties. On one hand, Ukraine's military advances and Western unity show remarkable progress. On the other, key questions remain unresolved. Will NATO and the U.S. commit to long-term security guarantees? Can Europe truly free itself from dependence on Russian energy? And most importantly, how long can Ukraine sustain this fight if the war stretches into years? An open question. The conversation between Trump and Zelensky balanced optimism with doubt. Ukraine's courage is unquestionable, but the future remains uncertain. So here's the question. Should Western allies step up their support to accelerate an end to the war? Or would that risk turning the conflict into something even larger? Clashing perspectives. Diplomacy, gratitude, and the future of Ukraine. This war was supposed to be over in a matter of days. Instead, it has dragged on for 3.5 years, and it doesn't look like it will end anytime soon. With this statement, Donald Trump highlighted both Ukraine's resilience and Russia's failure to achieve a swift victory. What Moscow envisioned as a lightning-fast campaign has instead become a grinding conflict, one that has damaged Russia's global standing while testing the endurance of Ukraine and its allies. A drone incident that raised eyebrows. During the meeting, reporters questioned Trump about reports of a suspected Russian drone incursion over Denmark that briefly shut down an airport near Copenhagen. Trump admitted he was aware but refrained from speculation. I have no response until I find out exactly what happened. We're going to know very soon. The cautious response mirrored the uncertainty surrounding the event, which Danish authorities suggested might have been sabotage. It also highlighted a broader concern. Russia's war in Ukraine could spill over into NATO airspace, raising the risk of escalation. NATO, security, and American support. When pressed on whether the U.S. would support NATO allies in case of direct confrontation with Russian aircraft, Trump kept his answer conditional. Depends on the circumstance. Yet, he was quick to underline NATO's strengthening during his presidency. He noted that member states increased their defense spending from 2% to 5% of GDP, which, in his telling, amounted to trillions of dollars and large purchases of American weapons. At the same time, Trump criticized the scale of aid provided under President Biden, arguing that the U.S. had given too much without clear returns. Still, he acknowledged Ukraine's resolve. People thought it would be over quickly because Russia is a big military power, but Ukraine? They're good fighters. A lot of courage, a lot of guts. Diplomacy versus hostility. The conversation inevitably turned to Trump's approach toward Vladimir Putin. Critics argue that U.S. leaders must take a hard line. Trump rejected this view. If I say terrible things about Putin, how can I then make a deal with him? I'm not aligned with Putin or anyone else. I'm aligned with the United States and for the good of the world. For Trump, peace is only possible through diplomacy, not by escalating hostility. You want me to be tough? I could be tougher than anyone, but you're never going to get a deal that way. His words revealed a belief that pragmatic negotiation, however controversial, is the only realistic path forward. The bigger debate: words or actions. This discussion underscored two competing strategies: rhetorical toughness, projecting strength through harsh words but often dismissed as symbolic and ineffective; pragmatic diplomacy, criticized for appearing too soft, yet defended as the only way to achieve lasting results. Trump made clear he favors the second path, insisting that alignment with U.S. interests and broader global stability requires deals, not endless confrontation. Zelensky's reminder of a longer war President Volodymyr Zelensky added a sobering perspective. From 2014 to 2022, people kept dying on the contact line, and nobody stopped him. His words reminded the audience that Russia's aggression began not in 2022, but years earlier with the annexation of Crimea and the war in Donbass. Despite international mediation, efforts led by leaders like Emmanuel Macron and Angela Merkel, ceasefires collapsed, prisoners remained in captivity, and violence never truly ceased. Zelensky's message was clear: broken promises have marked every stage of this conflict. An open question. The war has become a test of endurance not only for Ukraine, but for Russia and the West as well. The choice now seems stark. Should diplomacy take precedence, even if it means negotiating with adversaries, or is a hardline stance the only way to deter future aggression? You don't have the cards without us. Sharp exchanges on aid, ceasefires, and trust. If you didn't have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 3 days. With this blunt reminder, Donald Trump emphasized just how dependent Ukraine has been on American support. He cited $350 billion in aid, especially advanced weapons like Javelin missiles, as decisive in stopping a rapid Russian victory. Then, with a touch of sarcasm, he added, "Obama gave you sheets, and I gave you javelins." A debate over diplomacy. The meeting soon turned tense. Zelensky made clear his frustration. In his view, Moscow had repeatedly used negotiations as a smokescreen to prolong its violence. "We signed agreements, and yet our people were killed," he said, questioning the value of deals that failed to protect Ukrainians. Some in Washington pushed back, arguing that diplomacy, flawed as it may be, remains the only realistic path to ending the destruction. One American voice even suggested Zelensky's blunt criticism inside the Oval Office was disrespectful to the administration that had given Ukraine unprecedented support. Rising tensions in Washington, the exchange escalated further. U.S. officials criticized Ukraine for manpower shortages, accusing Kyiv of sending conscripts unwillingly to the front lines. Zelensky bristled at the accusation, countering that every country faces difficulties during war. "Even you have challenges. though you sit by a nice ocean and feel safe for now, but in the future, you too may feel the consequences. That remark sparked a fierce rebuttal. Trump's team shot back that Zelensky had no right to dictate how Americans should feel, warning that Ukraine was gambling with millions of lives and even gambling with World War III. What began as a strategic conversation quickly descended into a personal confrontation. The question of gratitude. Another flashpoint emerged over appreciation. U.S. representatives stressed that America had poured enormous financial, military, and political resources into Ukraine's defense. Yet, they claimed, Zelensky had not once explicitly said thank you during the meeting. Some went further, accusing him of campaigning against Trump during the U.S. elections in Pennsylvania. Zelensky rejected the criticism, pointing to Ukraine's sacrifices. From the very beginning of the war, we have been standing strong even when we were alone, and we are thankful. His words carried both pride in Ukraine's endurance and acknowledgement of the vital role American aid now plays. The larger divide. This fiery back and forth laid bare the fragile nature of U.S.-Ukrainian relations. Zelensky's position. Negotiations with Moscow have failed before. Ukraine must rely on its strength while still urging maximum international pressure. The American stance. Without U.S. support, Ukraine would be far weaker. Gratitude and cooperation are necessary if aid is to continue. At its heart, the clash revealed a deeper dilemma. Can Ukraine demand unwavering backing while questioning Washington's strategy? Or must it tread carefully to preserve unconditional support from its most powerful ally? An open question. The Oval Office debate underscored a delicate balance between survival, diplomacy, and alliance politics. Should Ukraine speak its mind, even at the risk of offending its strongest partner? Or should it temper its words to ensure American aid continues without hesitation? The ceasefire debate between saving lives and securing peace. If you could get a ceasefire right now, I tell you, you take it, so the bullets stop flying and your men stop getting killed. With this appeal, Donald Trump made his case for an immediate halt to hostilities. For him, any pause in the fighting, no matter how fragile, was preferable to continued bloodshed. Volodymyr Zelensky disagreed. To him, Ukrainians had already experienced the futility of temporary deals. Ceasefires negotiated with Russia, France, and Germany had all ended the same way: broken promises, unfulfilled prisoner swaps, and renewed violence. "We want assurances," Zelensky insisted, making clear that Kyiv would not settle for paper agreements with no real guarantees. Trust, respect, and U.S. politics. The discussion soon turned personal. Trump argued that Russia behaves differently depending on who sits in the Oval Office. He claimed that Putin respected him in a way he had not respected Barack Obama or Joe Biden. As proof, Trump pointed to the fact that during his presidency, despite years of political turmoil over alleged ties to Moscow, what he called a phony witch hunt, no major escalation had taken place. "He might have broken deals with Obama and Biden, but he didn't break them with me," Trump said. But his words came with a warning. Without American backing, Trump reminded Zelensky, Ukraine would be in a far weaker position. "You don't have the cards without us. You're not acting thankful, and that's not a nice thing." Between diplomacy and theater. As the meeting wound down, Trump made a remark that revealed the dual nature of the encounter. This would make great television. In that moment, the exchange seemed to hover between serious diplomacy and political spectacle. Equal parts negotiation, performance, and message to both domestic and international audiences. Key fault lines. This debate exposed the competing priorities of each side. For the U.S., Washington has poured massive resources into Ukraine's defense, but expects gratitude and flexibility in return. For Ukraine, past betrayals make temporary ceasefires meaningless without ironclad guarantees of enforcement. For Russia, narratives of respect or disrespect from U.S. leaders shape how Moscow explains its choices to escalate or hold back. Beneath it all lies a fundamental truth. America's military aid is essential to Ukraine's survival, but it comes with conditions, expectations, and political strings. An open question. The heart of the debate is painfully simple yet profoundly complex. Should Ukraine accept a ceasefire now, even without reliable guarantees, to save lives in the short term, or reject temporary deals in the hope that only long-term pressure can deliver a lasting peace?